Hey, good morning, guys. What was once thought to be a political pipe dream could soon become the answer to solving racial inequities in Evanston. Reparations for African Americans are in the works, making the small Illinois town a national leader on the issue. Congressional committees.
It was 150 years ago, and it was right now.
Presidential debates.
We're talking about mending what was broken.
All grappling with the question of financial retribution for America's darkest sin.
Yeah, I don't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago for whom none of us currently living are responsible is a good idea.
So we as a nation have not yet truly acknowledged and grappled with racism and white supremacy.
The national issue now being tackled on the local level in North Suburban Evanston. The solution? Using profits from the now legal sale of marijuana. It's the substance that put many African Americans behind bars.
I thought we'd do something radical, something very different and unlike any policy that we'd done before.
Alderman Robin Bruce Simmons is the force behind the nation's first ever reparations plan for African Americans. Here's how it's going to work. Money earned off the sales tax of recreational pot will be steered toward the reparations fund. The plan calls for $10 million over 10 years.
Our over-policing and the war on drugs and mass incarceration is alive here in Evanston, and that is why it is the ideal new tax revenue to use to fund our policy.
A committee will decide what the funds will be used for. Alderman Simmons hopes it'll be for housing assistance. She says a lack of affordable housing is one of the primary culprits for Evanston's declining black population. Census data shows Evanston's black population stood at nearly 23% in the year 2000. Nearly 2 decades later, it dropped under 17%.
We have evidence of a negative impact that remains from Jim Crow law and redlining. We have a wealth divide and an education gap and a life expectancy gap, and we were not seeing enough improvement.
Officials don't want weed alone to fuel the policy. It's a public fund, meaning anyone can contribute to it. Nina Caven's organization, Dear Evanston, was the first to chip in.
But after you've heard many, many stories, it's time to put your money where your mouth is. You can tell those stories, you can hear those stories, but unless you act to change those stories, you're not doing enough.
But public opinion is still swaying.
I'm not really for, I don't know, it's a very complicated issue. I don't think it would solve all the problems. I don't think it would solve the social issues.
We do need a lot of healing, and I think that would be a great step towards that.
I have mixed feelings about it. Of course, I can see the good and how it would benefit people who need it.
As the program rolls out, city leaders hope all of Evanston will buy in and make the case to the rest of the nation that the time is now for systemic racial repair.
We tend to lead in a lot of measures, and so this is consistent with the values that we have here in Evanston.
And joining me now is Cam Howard. He's the Midwest rep for the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, or NCOBRA for short. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I want to show this poll to you here. It shows the majority of Americans are not in favor of reparations. And when you break it down along racial lines, it's even more divided there. Why is this such a controversial issue? It seems to be dividing a lot of people here.
Well, it depends on what survey you're looking at. We've seen an Huffington Post survey in 2018 and another one in 2019 that shows that the majority of millennials are actually in favor of reparations, and even across racial lines. So it depends on what survey you're looking at. And also we see that the majority are in favor of it if it's in the form of education. So one of the biggest oppositions that we have in making this public push for reparations is to determine and define what it actually is going to be.
That seems to be the biggest challenge. So you see what Evanston is doing here. What do you make of their policy?
Well, we see that what Evanston has done is having reverberations around the country. Legislators around the country are trying to do similar things, so we think it's very important.
And can you tell me a little bit about NCOBRA and what you guys are doing, both in the Midwest region and on a national level, about this reparations discussion?
So NCOBRA, we were around for about 30 years. We've been working solely on the issue of reparations. A lot of our work is done in Washington around H.R. 40. Right now, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee is pushing that bill. We have over 122 co-sponsors, and it looks like it's going to make it to the House for a full vote, which we're excited about. And also, we're doing a lot of local initiatives. We're working with the state of New York, who has the legislation in that House We're working with the state of Vermont, and also here in Illinois, there's a bill that's going to be introduced. And we're also working with Alderman Sawyer, who has a bill introduced here in the city of Chicago. There'll be a symposium on February 17th at the Black Ensemble Theater, which will also highlight what we're doing in Chicago in hopes for a successful vote in the city council.
This is a discussion you said you guys have been a part of for 30 years, but you'd say that the momentum's really ramped up here recently, right?
It is ramped up, yeah. I mean, there's so much going on, and we seem to have the votes. When you look at what Alderman Simmons done in Evanston, she accomplished that with an 8-to-1 vote. You see more and more progressive legislators are coming to the conclusion that for there to be fair and equitable and just treatment of people of African descent in this country, only targeted resources towards specific injuries will have an effect.
All right, Cam Howard, thanks so much for joining me this morning and talking more about this.
Thank
Lots
you.
to discuss, very hot button issue.